Have you ever promised yourself that this time would be different, only to quietly quit a few weeks later? Do you know someone who keeps getting back up while everyone else slowly fades away? There's a level of persistence that looks almost inhuman from the outside. But it is not talent, it is not luck, and it is definitely not constant motivation. Most people believe never giving up is about willpower. They watch inspiring videos at midnight. They write bold goals in a new notebook. They ride the emotional high of a fresh start. But when discomfort arrives, when progress slows, when nobody notices, their energy collapses. What they do not understand is this: persistence is not an emotion, it is an identity. In Japanese philosophy, there are powerful ideas like gambaru, which literally means to persist or stubbornly continue with dignity. There is shuhari, the stages of mastery. First obey the rules, then detach from them, then transcend them. And there is wabi-sabi, the acceptance of imperfection as part of the path itself. These are not slogans, they are systems of becoming. But there is a catch. This path requires consistency when nobody is watching. No applause, no dramatic breakthroughs, just quiet repetition. If this message speaks to you, subscribe and activate the notification bell so you do not miss future lessons. Like this video and share it with someone who needs strength today. And in the comments, tell me the one goal you almost gave up on. I read every comment. Your engagement helps this message reach someone silently struggling. Now, back to the video. At 6:12 a.m., Ethan Caldwell was already awake, staring at the ceiling of his one-bedroom apartment in Chicago. 32 years old, marketing analyst, stable salary, decent life, and yet a quiet pattern followed him everywhere. He had almost finished 3 online certifications. The progress bars still sat at 80%. He had almost launched a fitness routine in January. The resistance bands were still hanging on the closet doorknob. He had almost started a side consulting business last summer. The domain name was purchased, the website template untouched. Every attempt began the same way: a surge of excitement, a new notebook, a carefully organized schedule. For the first 2 weeks he was unstoppable. Then something shifted. The work became repetitive. The results slowed, the excitement faded, and a thought would whisper, maybe this is not for you. Normal people call this losing interest. Ethan called it exhaustion. He would sit at his desk at night, laptop open, and feel a strange heaviness in his chest. Not physical fatigue, emotional depletion, as if the version of himself who believed he could succeed had quietly left the room. A behavioral neuroscience researcher at Stanford University, who had been studying habit formation for 18 years, discovered that motivation spikes are unreliable predictors of long-term consistency. The brain releases dopamine at the beginning of a new pursuit, not during sustained repetition. When the spike fades, most people interpret it as failure. Ethan did not know the research, but he felt the pattern: excitement, effort, emotional drop, withdrawal, almost. And deep down he was beginning to suspect that the problem was not his goals. It was who he believed himself to be when things stopped feeling good. The night Ethan abandoned his 3rd startup idea, the air in the parking garage felt colder than usual. It was 9:47 p.m. The fluorescent lights above his car flickered softly, casting pale reflections on the concrete floor. He sat in the driver's seat without turning the engine on, phone glowing in his hand. 3 unpaid software subscriptions, 2 unfinished marketing funnels, a half-written proposal draft. He stared at the screen until it dimmed. Then he whispered, "Why do I keep doing this?" At first he told himself it was about difficulty. The market was competitive, his job was demanding. He was tired. But sitting there in the silence, another truth surfaced. He did not quit because it was hard. He quit because discomfort made him question who he was. When the excitement faded, a voice inside him began to argue. If this were meant for you, it would feel easier. If you were disciplined, you wouldn't struggle like this. The discomfort did not just challenge his plan, it attacked his identity. Most people respond to this feeling by searching for new inspiration. They watch another video, they buy another course, they reset with dramatic intensity. But Ethan felt something heavier than frustration. He felt shame. Shame is quiet. It does not shout, it withdraws. A clinical psychologist at the University of Michigan, who had been studying self-sabotage for over 20 years, discovered that when people link temporary struggle to personal inadequacy, avoidance becomes automatic. The brain protects the ego by stepping away from the threat. Cause, emotional discomfort. Effect, identity doubt. Result, quitting. Ethan leaned back in his seat and closed his eyes. The garage hummed faintly around him. For the first time, he wondered if the real problem was not his lack of effort. It was that every setback felt like proof that he was not the kind of person who finishes. 2 days after the parking garage night, Ethan found himself walking slower than usual on West Madison Street. The wind off Lake Michigan cut through his coat, sharp and dry. He passed the same narrow storefront he had ignored for years. A faded wooden sign hung above the door, Takahashi Watch Repair. He had never gone inside. That morning, almost without thinking, he pushed the door open. A small brass bell rang. The shop smelled faintly of oil and old wood. Behind a glass counter cluttered with tiny tools sat a man in his late 50s, silver hair combed neatly back, thin reading glasses resting low on his nose. "Can I help you?" the man asked calmly. "My watch strap broke," Ethan said, holding it out. "I guess I need it fixed." The man examined it carefully. "Simple repair. 15 minutes. Ethan nodded, then hesitated. The silence in the shop felt different from the silence in the parking garage. It was steady, intentional. "Can I ask you something strange?" Ethan said finally. The man looked up. "You may. Why do some people never quit?" The man's eyes softened slightly. "Ah," he said, "you are asking about Ganbaru." He pronounced it slowly. Ganbaru means to persist, to stubbornly continue, but not loudly, not emotionally. It means you continue because stopping would betray who you are. Ethan frowned. "What if you don't know who you are?" The man paused, then removed his glasses. "When I was 34, I closed my first shop. Bankruptcy. I believed I was a failure for 5 years. His voice did not tremble. I did not learn persistence from success. I learned it from humiliation. Ethan felt something shift. This was not advice from a podium. It was confession from someone who had endured. Trust did not arrive dramatically. It settled quietly, like dust in afternoon light. The following Saturday at exactly 8 a.m., Ethan returned to the small watch shop. He did not fully understand why. He only knew that Kenji's words about Ganbaru had stayed with him all week, echoing during his commute, during meetings, even while brushing his teeth at night. Kenji was already at his workbench, adjusting the gears inside a silver pocket watch. "You came back," Kenji said without looking up. "I think I need to understand what you meant," Ethan replied. "About Ganbaru." Kenji set the watch down carefully. "Ganbaru," he began, "literally means to persist, to stubbornly continue. But philosophically, it means consistency as moral identity. You do not act because you feel motivated. You act because that is who you are." Ethan crossed his arms. "I've tried to be consistent before." Kenji shook his head gently. "No, you tried to feel consistent." The words stung. "Most people wait until they feel ready," Kenji continued. "They negotiate with emotion, but practitioners of Ganbaru decide first. They decide, I am someone who shows up. After that, feelings are irrelevant." Ethan felt resistance rise in his chest. 30 minutes, he thought. "I can't build anything meaningful in 30 minutes. As if hearing him, Kenji said, "Your task is simple. Choose one goal. Show up for 30 minutes every day. No scaling, no measuring success. Just presence. That's it. That is everything." A performance psychology researcher at the University of British Columbia, who studied identity-based habits for 12 years, discovered that when behavior aligns with self-definition, long-term consistency increases dramatically. The brain prefers actions that reinforce identity. Normal people chase outcomes. Ethan was being asked to build identity. That evening at 7:30 p.m., he opened his laptop and worked quietly for exactly 30 minutes. No drama, no announcement. He was not trying to be disciplined. He was beginning to become someone who shows up. By the third week of his 30-minute ritual, the excitement had completely disappeared. Ethan noticed it one Tuesday at 7:28 p.m., 2 minutes before his scheduled session. He stared at the laptop on his kitchen table and felt nothing. No inspiration, no dread, just flatness. He went anyway. The next Saturday he told Kenji, "It's boring now." Kenji gave a small nod, almost as if he had been waiting for that sentence. "Good," he said. "Good." Ethan frowned. "This is Shuhari," Kenji replied. 3 stages of mastery. Shu means to obey the rules. You follow structure exactly. No creativity. No shortcuts. Hack means to detach from the rules after understanding them. Rai means to transcend them completely. He leaned forward slightly. Most people quit in Shu. They think boredom means something is wrong, but boredom means you are finally past excitement. The literal meaning of Shu is to protect or obey. Philosophically, it is submission to process. Ethan realized he had never stayed long enough in any pursuit to truly enter Shu. He would redesign systems after 2 weeks, add complexity, search for novelty. Normal people mistake boredom for failure. Ethan was learning to see boredom as proof of depth. So I just keep doing the same 30 minutes, he asked. For 90 days, Kenji said calmly. No optimization. A learning scientist at Columbia University who had studied skill acquisition for 25 years discovered that repetition under stable structure strengthens neural pathways more effectively than constant variation. Mastery begins in monotony. On day 32, Ethan wanted to adjust his plan, make it more efficient. He paused. Shu, he reminded himself. At 7:30 p.m., he opened his laptop again. No improvement. No expansion. Just the same work. He was no longer chasing progress. He was protecting the stage he was in. Work pressure arrived quietly. A new campaign deadline. Late emails. 2 back-to-back client presentations. On day 47, Ethan skipped his 30 minutes. Just tonight, he told himself. The next night, he skipped again. By the end of the week, the ritual had dissolved. The old voice returned. See, this is who you are. He felt the familiar pull to quit entirely, to delete the files, to start fresh next month. Normal people restart dramatically, as if intensity can erase inconsistency. Instead, he walked into Kenji's shop on a grey Thursday afternoon and admitted, I broke the streak. Kenji nodded slowly. Wabi-sabi, he said. Which means, literally, it means the beauty of imperfection, the acceptance of impermanence and flaws. Philosophically, it means the crack is part of the structure. Ethan looked unconvinced. When I was young, Kenji continued, I smashed a client's antique watch in frustration. I wanted perfection. Perfection nearly destroyed my career. I had to learn that flaws are not failure. They are evidence of effort. A clinical psychology researcher at Kyoto University, who had studied shame resilience for 15 years, discovered that self-compassion predicts long-term persistence more than self-criticism. When people treat mistakes as information, not identity, they return faster. So I don't restart? Ethan asked quietly. No, Kenji said. You resume. That night at 7:30 p.m., Ethan opened his laptop. No apology, no dramatic reset, just continuation. He was not repairing perfection. He was strengthening continuity. The night he resumed, something subtle changed. There was no surge of pride, no relief, just quiet action. And the next evening at 7:30 p.m., he sat down again, 30 minutes, then the next day, and the next. By the end of 2 weeks, Ethan noticed that the internal debate had softened. The argument in his head, should I, do I feel like it, grew shorter each night. The chair at his kitchen table no longer felt like a battlefield. It felt neutral. When he told Kenji this, the older man nodded. Repetition rewires the brain, he said. Not emotionally, biologically. He explained it simply. When a behavior is repeated under stable conditions, the brain strengthens the neural pathway through a process similar to insulation around a wire. The more insulated the wire, the easier the signal travels. A cognitive neuroscience researcher at Johns Hopkins University, who had studied habit loops for 22 years, discovered that consistent repetition reduces decision fatigue and lowers emotion resistance over time. The brain prefers efficiency. Cause, repeated action without drama. Effect, neural efficiency, insight. Quitting begins to require more energy than continuing. Normal people rely on bursts of inspiration. They want intensity. Ethan was building inevitability. On day 63, he realized something almost unsettling. At 7:29 p.m., he did not negotiate. He simply stood up, walked to the table, and opened his laptop. He was no longer trying to be consistent. He was becoming someone for whom showing up required no discussion. By early autumn, the changes were no longer invisible. At 9:03 a.m. on a Monday morning, Ethan sat in the conference room on the 14th floor of his office building, reviewing campaign metrics. 6 months earlier, he would have been tense, tapping his pen, quietly blaming tight deadlines or unclear instructions. Now he spoke calmly, outlining next steps without complaint. After the meeting, his manager paused. "You've been steady lately," she said. "Whatever you're doing, keep doing it." The word steady stayed with him all day. Normal people chase bursts of productivity. They work intensely for a week, then disappear into distraction. Ethan had become predictable. At 7:30 p.m., he worked. On weekends, he reviewed. No announcements, no dramatic milestones. His side consulting project quietly went live. No launch party, no social media declaration. Just a functioning website and his first small client inquiry. It did not feel extraordinary. It felt natural. When he told Kenji, the older man only smiled faintly. "Gambaru," he said, "to persist with dignity, not loudly." Ethan understood it differently now. Gambaru was not about pushing harder. It was about aligning action with identity so completely that effort lost its emotional weight. A behavioral economist at the University of Chicago, who had studied long-term performance for 19 years, found that individuals who view consistency as part of who they are experience less stress under pressure. Identity reduces friction. Sitting at his kitchen table that evening, Ethan realized something subtle but profound. He was no longer trying to become disciplined. He simply was. Winter arrived without ceremony. 6 months had passed since the night in the parking garage. Ethan's routine remained intact. His consulting work had grown slowly, steadily, but nothing dramatic had happened. No viral breakthrough, no sudden promotion, just incremental progress. One evening, as snow pressed softly against the shop windows, Kenji asked him a question. "If no one ever applauds you," he said quietly, adjusting a magnifying lens over his eye, "do you still continue?" Ethan did not answer immediately. He imagined a future where his side business stayed modest, where no one praised his discipline, where his efforts remained mostly unseen. A year ago, that image would have discouraged him. He would have searched for something more exciting. Normal people need visible reward to sustain effort. They measure persistence by applause. Now the thought felt different. Not heavy, not threatening. "I think I would," Ethan said slowly, "because stopping would feel wrong." Kenji nodded. "That is Ganbaru becoming internal, not performance. Alignment." Ganbaru, literally to persist, had shifted from strategy to self-definition. Persistence was no longer about achieving something extraordinary. It was about refusing to betray the version of himself he had become. A motivation researcher at Yale University, who had studied intrinsic drive for 17 years, discovered that when behavior aligns with personal values rather than external rewards, endurance increases significantly. The brain no longer waits for validation. As Ethan walked home through the quiet snow, he felt something calm and grounded. He did not need excitement. He needed alignment. And alignment, he realized, does not require an audience. One quiet Saturday morning, nearly a year after their first conversation, Ethan stood again inside the small watch shop. The air smelled of metal and polished wood. Kenji was adjusting the delicate hands of an old mechanical watch, movement steady, unhurried. "I think I understand now," Ethan said. Kenji looked up but did not speak. Gambaru isn't about pushing through emotion. It's deciding who you are before emotion speaks. Shuhari isn't about speed. It's respecting the stage you're in. And wabi-sabi, it's not lowering standards. It's refusing to quit because of imperfection. Kenji gave a faint smile. "Then you have learned." Gambaru, literally to persist, had become Ethan's identity. He showed up because that was who he was. Shuhari had taught him to obey structure long enough for mastery to form, instead of chasing novelty. Wabi-sabi had allowed him to stumble without collapsing his self-worth. Later that month, his younger brother called. "I'm thinking of dropping out," he admitted. "It's harder than I thought." A year ago, Ethan would have offered motivation. Now he offered structure. "Pick one thing," he said calmly. 30 minutes a day. No drama. Just continue. He was not preaching. He was describing how he lived. The system was simple but not easy. Gambaru, persist because it is who you are. Shuhari, honor the stage, especially the boring one. Wabi-sabi, accept imperfection without retreat. What have you been quitting because it stopped feeling exciting? Where are you in your stage of mastery right now? If no one applauded you, would you still continue? You are not weak. You are using the wrong system. Comment your first small step. Subscribe and continue this journey. Be present. Walk with honor. Follow the path. The system Ethan learned was not complicated. It was disciplined simplicity practiced daily. Ganbaru means to persist, literally to stubbornly continue. Philosophically, it is identity before emotion. You decide who you are, and then you act accordingly, not because you feel strong, but because stopping would contradict your character. Shu-Ha-Ri represents the 3 stages of mastery. Shu is obedience to structure. Ha is thoughtful detachment after understanding. Ri is natural transcendence. Most people abandon their goals during Shu because repetition feels unimpressive, but mastery is born in monotony. Wabi-sabi is the acceptance of imperfection. Literally, it recognizes beauty in flaws and impermanence. Philosophically, it protects continuity. Mistakes are not proof of inadequacy. They are evidence of participation. A behavioral scientist at Princeton University who studied long-term achievement for over 20 years concluded that sustained identity-based behavior outperforms short bursts of emotional intensity in nearly every measurable domain. The brain stabilizes around what it repeatedly does. Ethan did not become extraordinary overnight. He became consistent, and consistency quietly changed his life. Now ask yourself, what have you been quitting because the excitement faded? Are you honoring your current stage or trying to skip ahead? If progress stayed invisible for a year, would you still continue? You are not weak. You were using the wrong system. Comment your first small step below. Subscribe and activate the notification bell. Watch the next lesson and continue building who you are. Be present. Walk with honor. Follow the path.